Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and today we're going to talk about Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. We're going to talk about how to create compelling stories by setting the borders of your story and committing to those borders. And all of this is coming from Ghost 2021, spectacular new television show that really shows exactly how to create a compelling story that is character-driven rather than plot-driven. Which, honestly, I'm a plot person. I want to know, like, here's a good example, right? Arcane recently came out, and Arcane was a absolutely stunningly visually beautiful television show. But that was very, that was like there's an apocalypse, and you're like, well, why was there an apocalypse? And they're like, it doesn't matter why there was an apocalypse. These are the people that were affected by the apocalypse. Do you care now? And I'm kind of like, no, I don't. Or like, why did this apocalypse happen? I need to know the plot, right? Like, and they're like, no, it's just the characters. Care about them, even though you don't know why they're in this terrible problem. And I'm like, ugh. Right? So Arcane didn't do it. I liked Arcane overall. It was so visually stunning that I absolutely love watching it. I highly recommend Arcane if you guys haven't seen it. Definitely every Dungeon Master content, just from the perspective of painting a world with a palette, right? And that's a whole video of itself. But Ghost 2021, which is a brand new show on Paramount Plus, does character-driven stories that are compelling, better than I think any show I've ever seen. It's incredible, right? All right, so first of all, spoilers for Ghost 2021 going forward, and let's get into it. All right, whole series. Okay, all right. So. Basically, what are the borders of the Ghost 2021 story? So they set these borders, and they're like Haunted Mansion. And you're like, okay, I've seen that in every Scooby-Doo mystery. And they're like, oh, you did see the Haunted Mansion in Scooby-Doo mystery? Everything you saw there is real. Like, ghosts are in the Haunted Mansion, right? So, like, and you're like, oh, okay, so Scooby and, Shaggy were worried that the ghosts could affect them. And they're like, yeah, exactly. Like, the ghosts are, they're ghosts. They're dead people. They're people who have not gone up to heaven, right? Or and they just remain here behind because they have some kind of unresolved stuff, right? And they're like, so the ghosts are here and they do not get to go to heaven. And they actually show us in Ghost 2021 that some people are just good and they go to heaven. Now, of course, I'm an evangelical Christian. I don't want to sign on to that. But this is the borders they're setting for their world. And they have every right to do that, right? So they're like, you're good. So you die and then you go right to heaven, right? Or you have to stay here, right? And you have to resolve your issues, right? And actually, some of these ghosts never resolve their issues, right? So the Ghost 2021 story is... here's the people who are ghosts in the Haunted Mansion. Thorfinn is the first. He's a Viking, right? And he has been here since like 1400 AD, right? Like ridiculously long, right? And then there's a robber baron, a 1920s robber baron's daughter, and then there is an American Indian, right? A Native American, and he's been there since like 1800. And there's a hippie from 1960s. And there's a stockbroker from the 1980s, and there's an American Revolutionary soldier from 1770, and there's a 1930s American jazz singer, right? And these are all the ghosts who are there. And then there's from the 1970s, there is an insurance adjuster who was a Boy Scout who got shot through the neck with an arrow, right? And basically, the rules of the show is that everyone who dies on the property who is not taken up to heaven, because some people, they literally show someone die on the property and then get taken up to heaven, right? And basically, if they die on the property, they stay there, right? And they can't leave the property, right? They also cannot communicate with anyone who cannot see ghosts. And there are only certain things that allow people to see ghosts, right? One of them is if you've had some kind of trauma. So if you have a very significant trauma, you might be able to see ghosts, right? The other thing is children can often see ghosts. And they explain this in the show as essentially when people say, oh, that kid has an imaginary friend, it's often a ghost. The kid is seeing a ghost and speaking with ghosts, right? And there's this one incredible thing where basically the 1920s robber baron. You know what? I'm going to rethink that. I think she's 1890s. She's an 1890s robber baron's daughter, right? And she does not get along with Thorfinn. She doesn't like to be alone with Thorfinn. She likes to hang out with him in a group, but she doesn't deal with the Viking. And we find out later that Thorfinn died, and then he would sing her to sleep, right? When she was a child, and she could see him when she was a child. But here's the kicker, right? It terrified her because all of his songs are about killing Danishmen, right? Which, it's kind of a Viking thing, not very nice, and certainly wouldn't be very comfortable for a child, right? And so once you set these borders, right, and you say, hey, this is, the ghosts die. They either go to heaven or they stay here. They cannot leave the property. They can only interact with people who can see ghosts, and most people will not be able to interact with them, right? And they can all talk to each other, right? And then they have these ghost lives that are very different than our lives, right? If you set your borders are set clearly, and then you commit to them, you can tell amazing stories, just absolutely amazing stories. So one of the things I've been thinking about, an idea that I've had in my head for a long time. So if you come to Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, you can set down and you can make some, let's say you just stay bog standard Tolkien. Now, in my opinion, Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, Faerun is, I can say this because I'm not Wizards of the Coast, Faerun is bog standard Tolkien. It's, elves, dwarves, humans, period. Let's go. Tell the story, right? And if you get the Essentials kit, that's essentially what you're getting. You're getting bog standard Tolkien that you can play in a box, right? Now, actually, with Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, you can tell a bog standard Tolkien story and have a blast, have a really good time with it, right? But if you go a little further, so one of the things I've been thinking about for a campaign is that you have humans, dwarves, elves, right? Just like a Tolkien campaign. The dwarves and the elves, just like in Tolkien, are constantly fighting each other, okay? The humans are making money off of the fight between elves and dwarves, and they really fuel the fight because they make a ton of money selling provisions and weapons to both sides, right? Well, what ended up happening is the elves start really winning, and winning hard, and they come across this idea that there are only 3 mountains left, but there's thousands of dwarves in each of these mountains. But the elves are going to we are going to do a strike all at the same time, right? And we're going to flood all of these mountains, and then we're going to and then as the dwarves come out of the mountains, we're just going to slay them, right? So here's the problem: the elves' plan to win the war works too good, and they literally kill. And also the dwarves just go deeper, and 99% of all the dwarves die because they drowned in their own mountain, right? In each of their mountains, they drowned, right? And then the 1% who get out, the masses of elves that are there, they just slay them, right? And so essentially, all the dwarves are dead, right? And the elves realize they didn't win the war; they literally slew the last dwarf, right? And they're like, "Oh my gosh, we didn't mean to do that. We just wanted to defeat the dwarves. We didn't want to exterminate them, right?" And then the humans are like, oh, crap, right? So the first thing that happens in this world is there's going to be a search to see if there are any dwarves anywhere, right? And so the elves who just ended, have spent 200 years trying to thoroughly defeat the dwarves and, take their mountains and, really rout them, right? Now become the greatest champions to find, a male and a female dwarf, that are still on, that are actually still, within the, that are still able to do this. The last dwarves that are still able to actually procreate, and so everybody, the humans and the elves, it goes from trying to defeat the dwarves to finding them, right? And my whole point is, if you set the borders and then you commit to that, you can tell absolutely stunningly amazing stories. And I have 100% proof of this because I've really never seen a show like Ghosts. It blew me away. I watched it with my wife, and she really enjoyed it. And even the kids were kind of just like watching it side-eyed, while they scroll through TikTok on their phones, and they would laugh at jokes every now and then, and it's incredibly compelling television. I highly recommend that you define your borders, do something different, right? And it doesn't even have to be that different. Just know what your borders are and commit to it, and that can create some incredibly compelling stories. All that's my opinion. Love to hear your thoughts. Let me know in the comments below. Please consider subscribing, and have a wonderful millennium.